So thank you for joining me. My name is Jerry. I'm a Principal Client Advisor here at Global Reviews. So this morning I'm going to be looking at lost opportunities within the sports betting industry. And in this webinar I'm going to focus on just 5 providers: William Hill, Coral, Ladbrokes, Bet365 and Paddy Power. The session will last about 20 minutes or less. So without further ado, I'm going to press on. Okay, so you should be seeing a slide called Lost Opportunity Scores for Leading Brands. So what is a lost opportunity score and how do we calculate this? So to do that, we just need to take a step back for a moment. So as part of our research, the DME, which is the Digital Marketing Effectiveness study that we do, we focus on the discover part of an in-market consumer's journey. So these are people who are in market looking for a sports betting provider. So when they're researching sports betting providers with a view to choosing one to place a bet with. So as part of that research, they're given a task to imagine they want to place an online bet on sport. So for example, horses or football. So they're told to go to different websites. We don't lead them in any way. It's a free search, but they're told to go out and research different websites to find out which companies are available and which sites they might like to place a sports bet with. So after they have done that, we ask them to make a short list of the providers they would choose, and then we ask them to choose just one of those companies. So that's a little bit of background on the research aspect of the study. And then the lost opportunity score then itself is the score that measures the drop-off between those that shortlisted you but didn't choose you at final preference. So it's always going to be in the minus, but just how big that minus is determined by a number of factors. For example, on their journey, did they go to an aggregator? Were they just looking for the best prices? But it also includes the experience that they have on the website. So if we look at the results of those that we've featured here just in this webinar, we can see that William Hill lose the least from shortlisting to final preference. So of those that shortlisted and then went on to choose William Hill, they have the least drop off, and we can see that Coral have the biggest drop off in terms of those that initially shortlisted them but didn't then choose them at final preference. So this is where this score is derived from, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. So now I want to just take a look back at that discover journey and what happens within that journey, so the kind of pathway to preference. So we've got initially, we've got recall, and this is an unprompted question where they're asked if they were thinking of a sports betting provider, who would they think of? So we can see here that we have Ladbrokes and William Hill and Bet365 pretty much on par in terms of recall scores, and then less so for Paddy Power and Coral. Initial preference is around if they were to choose initial provider, who would they choose? So again, you can kind of see similar stacking up there, William Hill coming out at top, but not far behind are Ladbrokes. Visited, so these are the sites that they visited as part of the research that they were doing to find a website provider. And then shortlisted is who they would put on their shortlist, and bear in mind that they may not have visited the site of those that they put on the shortlist. And final preference, as I've said already, is if they had to choose one provider to place a bet with, who would it be? And then the lost opportunity score is derived from that shortlist to the final preference. So just to kind of repeat what I said there. So let's take a kind of further look at what's going on in some of these stages. So most participants already have a provider in mind when thinking about a sports betting provider. So we ask at the start of the research, if you wanted to place a sporting bet, which one company would you select? 87% of the participants had a provider in mind that they would select. So, and then of those that would not have an initial preference, just over half of those was typically down to just selecting the best offer. So we've got two aspects there kind of driving brand of choice. One is they already have a provider in mind, and two is they're just after the best offer. However, 24% said that they would need to know the features and options provided before they would choose. So there are opportunities there to get a share of market, especially given that 66% use providers' websites when researching their sports betting options, including placing a bet. So it shows us that while there are difficulties in terms of getting that share to market, there are also opportunities. We also know that bettors have more than one provider, they're promiscuous, and 44% of participants told us that while they have a sports betting provider, they are open to switching. So here we're kind of looking a little bit deeper at why they have an initial preference. So of those 87% who said they have initial preference, it breaks down something like this. So they're a current customer, they've used them before, so they're familiar with the brand and they trust the company. So these are the three main reasons for choosing a company. But we can also see, and those that didn't have an initial preference, is, as I said previously, they would typically be just because they're after the best offer. But we can also see that they need to learn more. So some of it's about their lack of knowledge. Some of it's down to recommendations. However, we'll see later on that this is not a big factor in terms of shortlisting and final preference. And then they need to confirm specific features and options. So again, this actually becomes more important as we go down through that funnel in terms of that initial preference, shortlisting, and then final preference. So we can see here that after familiarity, being a current customer and trust, that betting options and offers that are easy to understand really is an important driver for initial preference. And obviously this will be informed by the fact that they've used them before, they are a current customer and they use them already, or the fact that they will have come across them during their research. So really our job is to convince people to change their minds, and we can see that there are opportunities there for that to happen. So that was initial preference. If we look at the drivers for shortlisting, so these are the companies, a short list of companies that they would choose after they've done some initial research. So we can see that the main driver there is familiarity. So I'm just going to remove my little widget here so I can just see the squares. So we can see that there's not much difference there between the driver for people shortlisting William Hill and Coral in terms of they're familiar with them. So 59% said they would choose William Hill. They would shortlist William Hill based on the fact that they're familiar with them. The next important factor is they've used them before. So again, this is a driver for Coral. This is a big reason why people are shortlisting them, is because they've used them before, much more so than any of the others. They're a little ahead of Ladbrokes, and for Paddy Power, this isn't a main driver for in comparison to Coral. And finally, the third driver is they look easy to use. This is just literally a fraction ahead of they have good odds and offers, but they look easy to use. We can see again for Coral, this is one of the main drivers for people choosing them, but there's not, again, a bigger difference between the top and the bottom there, which is Ladbrokes and Coral, but then, you know, pretty much not a lot between William Hill, Bet365 and Coral. So again, all this I suppose is indicating that there's not a whole lot of difference between providers in terms of odds and offers, and they're looking easy to use, and the website experience. So really it demonstrates that there has to be, I think this highlights even more the importance of the website experience and how that is important in terms of influencing people when they choose you. So when it comes to final preference, losing out to who? So if we look across the top here, these are our 5 stages in terms of the research, and we can see that this is the final preference of those that shortlisted Coral, Paddy Power, second one, Bet365, Ladbrokes, and William Hill. If we take each one of those, and just in the blue box of the minus scores are the lost opportunity scores. So of those that shortlisted Coral, who then went on to choose them at final preference, and who else did they choose? So that pie chart then shows that 16% chose Coral, but we can see that actually a bigger percent chose William Hill. And then there's pretty much an even split between Ladbrokes, Paddy Power and Bet365. Another are just a combination of lots of other like Betfred and other brands that we had in the study. And if we look at Paddy Power, so of those that shortlisted Paddy Power, who then chose them, so we can see that a quarter went on to choose them, just over a quarter, but then we have Bet365 taking up more of their share than anyone else, and then it kind of in ascending order, William Hill, Ladbrokes, and then Coral just taking a short percentage of theirs. For Bet365, we can see that William Hill are taking up a higher portion of their final preference customers, and then Paddy Power come in next, and then Ladbrokes and Coral. So I suppose Coral being the one that are taking the least portion of the final preference there for those brands. William Hill and taking a big chunk, I suppose, or the higher proportion of chunk from most of the providers apart from Paddy Power. So then for Ladbrokes, we can see again William Hill dominating there, pretty much taking a lot of share in comparison to some of the rest of the sites. So Bet365 coming in next, and then we have Paddy Power and then Coral again. And then for William Hill, we can see they're retaining a greater portion of their final preference customers, which obviously aligns with their score. And we can see that Ladbrokes are taking a bigger share than the other providers there in terms of choosing them at final preference from that shortlist. Okay. So we know that kind of final preference choices are driven by more than just trust. So we saw kind of drivers for initial preference were around familiarity, trust. They've used them before. And again, we can see that on the desktop, trust and using and familiarity are still top there. But we can also see that the website experience is starting to have more prominence there in terms of what are the drivers behind final preference. And for mobile, again, it's the same story. Familiarity and trust are the main drivers, and then after that, we can see that the website experience is starting to play a more important role in terms of the drivers for final preference than it initially did, say, for initial preference. So in terms of drivers for final preference and who's scoring well or the reasons why people are choosing one brand over another or why they've chosen that brand, we can see that for final preference, I've used them before, so familiarity, and again, this is a key driver for Coral in terms of why they would choose them. Trust is the second reason here. So for choosing a provider final preference, and again for Coral, this is one of the main reasons why people are choosing them at final preference. And then their betting options are easy to understand. It's the third driver for final preference, and we can see that Coral and William Hill pretty much uneven there, and there's not a massive amount of difference in terms of a gap between the largest, the highest scoring and the lower scoring, or the main drivers. So for example, it's a 6% difference as opposed to some of the other ones where the differences might be a bit bigger. So for example, in trust, we can see that Paddy Power are the lower. That wouldn't be a reason why people would necessarily choose Paddy Power final preference. We can see that having used them before is a bigger driver for them. So if we kind of look at it vertically rather than horizontally, you can start to see for each brand what are the drivers in terms of reasons for choosing them at final preference. So just let you absorb that there for a minute. Okay, so I've spoken a lot about how trust, familiarity, and use them before are key drivers. But also the fact that the website, the experience, is becoming a more dominant provider. So I want to just take a look at betting options, some examples of making it easy for players to understand event and betting options, given how this is becoming, this is a key driver for choosing them as final preference. So the two tasks that we use within the study, so the second part of our study is the DSE, which is the Digital Sales Effectiveness. Now in our new study Fruition, both of these products, the DME that I mentioned at the start and the DSE, are combined. But for this webinar, I've got results from the two studies. So the two tasks within our DSE that look at measuring understanding event options and understanding event betting options, beg pardon, are, this is an example. So for locating and understanding event options, it's your task is to find the page listing all events currently available to bet in play. And then for understanding betting options, it's your task is to find the odds for Destined to win the Breeders' Cup Classic horse race. So these are just example tasks that we would give participants as part of the study. So if we look at learning about event options, we can see in terms of effectiveness and satisfaction and evaluation, Paddy Power leading there from a task point of view. So effectiveness is the combination of success and confidence that people had within their task. Efficiency, so those that did it the quickest were Ladbrokes. So that's the learn about event option. And then if we look at learning about betting options, we can see that from an effectiveness pretty much across the board on all of them, apart from betting support, Ladbrokes score the highest in terms of that task. And then for terms of betting support, it's Coral. So this is where bet slip support will be provided, contextual help, inline help. So how are you supporting customers in terms of helping them find what they need and place that bet? So if we just look at some examples, we can see that Bet365 is the top performer when it comes to locating and understanding event options on desktop, and they're second on mobile. So the task was to find the page listing all of today's football matches, showing the match results, odds for each match. And we can see that 85% completed the task successfully, and on mobile it was 81%. We start to look at kind of, what might be leading it. We can see that there's kind of a clear visual hierarchy between the elements on the page. There's a clear distinction between the components within those elements. You've used the color palette really well to kind of distinguish those components, to highlight headings and to display that visual information hierarchy. And also that it's not just so content heavy. Got a nice use of mix-up imagery, but they're not dominating the page. So quick load time, and we know how important that is. If we look at bet fixers, they have an 83% effectiveness of locating betting options. They were first on mobile. So we can see they're kind of straightforward content tiles, help customers to kind of find their race quickly. So the hamburger menu is a simple A to Z order with also the use of icons, so customers can find all the event options in there from the home page, and the event page is easy to understand and break down with the nice use of section titles by time. So in Australia, Crown Bet lead the industry in locating and understanding event options. So they had a 90% task rate and 80% didn't encounter problems when trying to complete the task. So we can see the key navigation menu is easy to find on the left. 85% found the link from the menu straight away. The section headers are clear and easy to understand. You can see that there's a nice 3-column structure which kind of helps form that mental model. So on the far left we have the navigation, in the middle we have the content, and on the far right we have promotions. And then they're using again icons here, nice just to kind of quickly facilitate finding stuff and making that distinction between events. SkyBet provide only one link to the events in play, so they had a 90% success rate. So this is, I suppose, the example of less is more, and being able to quickly eliminate options by the fact that you only have one option. So it's clear classification there and signposting. So yeah, we can see that the link to the event is easy to find, and they only see one live option, and then that tab remains selected so that they know that that's where they are at all times. So again, just helping them establish where they are. So Betfred, so they provide a simple process as a bet slip to select the accumulator. So this is around the kind of help and support. So we can see kind of it's easy to find upcoming games, so if they're in play, there's a simple click the match bet and add bet slip in line, and then they provide support there for those who mightn't be used to certain terminology or certain features on provider. And I suppose it's about catering for the different levels of customers that come to your site. So you're going to have those expert users who know what they're doing, have used it before, and just want to find an event quickly and place a bet. And then you'll have those who are maybe not so sure of features and functions that they're using. So it's about catering to those different levels. In Australia, William Hill's homepage leads the industry. So we can kind of see that they have a clear value proposition, clear pathways to help. So they use separate tabs to kind of hide information. So again, just exposing some content, not exposing all of it, so making it feel a lot cleaner and less heavy and cluttered. And then we've got kind of pathways to important content are front and center. So they achieve the top score for offering a clear starting point for information that they expect to find about placing the sporting bet. They also score top 4. It looks like an easy website to use. And then Best Pictures homepage leads the MSE sports betting industry, so the mobile sales effectiveness sports betting industry, for being the least cluttered 82. And they also had 83% most effective visitors when locating event options, or event options in the States. So they present just enough information without it feeling overwhelming. They clearly highlight where users are within the page, and they present clear pathways to avoid any confusion. So you are here. And then the information hierarchy also supports kind of being able to locate secondary information, but also information that may be important, such as T's and C's, and help at the bottom of the screen. And then finally, UBet homepage leads the Australian mobile sales effectiveness sports betting industry for the homepage evaluation. So we can see here they're really high scores in terms of looks like a website that's easy to use, has a visual design that's appealing, displays all the information I expect to see, and offers a clear starting point. So really those guys doing really well in terms of the homepage. And given that this is sometimes the page that people start from, then, you know, obviously the signposting is really important here, and the impressions that this page give are really important. So I've run over a little bit, but just to recap on kind of what we've looked at. So we've learned about lost opportunity, and we saw the scores for the 5 providers. So that's the difference between those that shortlisted you and those that chose your final preference. We've kind of reviewed the drivers for the different stages of research journey, so the initial preference, the shortlisting, and the final preference. We've reviewed what are the main drivers for shortlisting and final preference for the featured providers, and we've learned that after familiarity, current customer and trust, that website experience in particular, betting options that are easy to understand are key drivers when choosing a provider. And we've looked at some examples of who performs well in our digital sales effectiveness study for tasks that relate to this driver around betting options that are easy to understand. So that is kind of the bulk of the webinar for today. I've also got the methodology overview. I'm going to spend the last few minutes just looking at what our methodology is and how we approach it at Global Reviews here. So if there isn't any questions on anything that I've looked at so far, then I'll move on. Or if you do have any questions, then please I've got an email address at the end to direct them towards Hannah, who's our commercial director. So I'm just going to quickly spend the next couple of minutes looking at the methodology. So So the initial part of the webinar that we just looked at the discover stage. So this is the research stage, as I mentioned, and then the sales effectiveness looks at the consider and the act stages. So what we've looked at so far has kind of covered those 3 stages there. So that was the DME, and the DME, so we've kind of got 200 in-market consumers. Pardon, sorry, I pressed that by accident. We have the brand recall unprompted, the initial preference unprompted, brand awareness, and then we have give them a task to find, this example, home insurance, but in the example that we've seen, it would have been sports betting provider, and then we get them to go off and do some research, then make a shortlist and do the final preferred. So we've kind of covered off all that in my previous slide. And then if we look at the digital mobile sales effectiveness research, so this would have been some of the tasks that we looked at previously, the example of who's doing well. So part 1 is in-market consumer testing, and then we combine that with a best practice audit. So then we break that down into different stages. So we've got initial engagement, so what's happening when they're coming to the site initially, introducing options, so how are you helping them find what they need, and then evaluating options, how are you helping them make that, choose between options, facilitating decisions, how are you helping them make the choice from those options that they've found, and then channel selection is around, do they do this online, can they call someone, is there live chat, and obviously this is more applicable in other industries that we work in than the sports betting industry necessarily. And then application form is where we look at, the apply, or in your case it would be the register. So if we look at part 1, which is in-market consumer testing, so we recruit in-market consumers who are looking for your product, and we recruit these through our partner panel providers. The study, it's executed in their own environment, so they download a little piece of software that they run while they're doing the test, and it's in their own home. So they only evaluate one brand within the study. So if a customer is already a customer of yours, we would not put them onto your website because we don't want to have the bias. And also we don't put them onto multiple websites, so we only get them to evaluate one brand. So for the in-market consumers, we get them to complete tasks that reflects the consumer research journey for your product. And then we look at kind of the success, the satisfaction and confidence. We also analyse how they navigate through your site, so the click streams, the heat maps. And then we look at the problems they experienced and why, some of which are claimed and then some of which we can see through the analysis that we do ourselves here. So as we're getting them to do that task at the beginning of the study and at the end, and during the task, we also get them to answer attitudinal questions. So what is most important when they're researching, what they like, they don't like, and we also capture voice of customer. So where they score below a certain number, we ask them to tell us why they gave that a low score. The best practice audit, so this contains over 500 criteria, which are broken down into kind of features and functions that support the research journey. And then content is provided to help consumers choose your brand and product. For example, this is a binary audit, so it's yes/no questions, and examples include, does the website provide a call me back service? Yes, no. Does the form provide immediate error messaging? This criteria differs, so each industry has a different criteria, and those criteria are given different weightings depending on the importance of that part of the journey, I suppose, in terms of the decision-making process. So then we bring these two together, so the in-market consumer testing and then the audit, and then they're weighted and we deliver our top level score. So you can see kind of the customer behaviour, the attitude, the audit, and then the best practice. All those are brought together, and then the results are processed. They're combined into the customer journey categories and stages. Scores are weighted based on consumer needs and global reviews expertise, and then we output the final results. So I'd like to thank you so much for your attendance today. I really appreciate it. Again, as I said, if you'd like to discuss anything further, please contact Hannah Rose, who's our Senior Commercial Director, and this is her email, hannah.farrington@globalreviews.com. And I'll leave that up there for the next 10 seconds or so that you can take that down before I sign off. So thank you.